Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Soulgivers. Soulgivers is brought to you by Gravity Games. It's a two-player game for ages 14 and up, and games range anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes. In the Soulgivers multiverse, two populations fight for the Fragment. It is the remains of an ancient planet, as well as the only cure that can save them from a cosmic disease called Decay. The clash between the two civilizations is harsh and desperate. The warring creatures can control the field, manipulate the elements, and bend the enemy's will. All of it for just one goal: carry the fragment to their own portal to rush back to their dying planet before anyone else does. So the goal of Soulgivers is to capture that fragment, which is located at the center of the board, and then deliver it to one of your two portals. Are you ready to save your world from extinction? So let's take a look at setup. In the middle of the board, you have a main tile. It is basically an empty tile, so to say, but it is the mother tile. This is where you'll place the fragment and the fragment's barrier. Then you're looking for the interference tiles with these little white circles on them. And these were going to be used and talked about in a bit, but you'll place them out so you're going to start to form this 5x5 grid. Now, you'll take the rest of the tiles, you'll shuffle them up and deal them face down. And then once you've created the grid, you'll flip them face up, ready for play. Then each player chooses a population. Now, in this prototype, I just have the orange and the aqua here, but really the difference is that you have a population card. It's in landscape mode, and this card is a one-time use per game, but they are different between the two different populations here. But what is the same is the Soulgivers. So you have the same set of Soulgivers that your opponent does. But that doesn't mean you'll be going up against the same set at any one time, because that is variable based on what you choose and what comes up in the deck, as you will be cycling through Soulgivers frequently. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to choose 3 Soulgivers to put in your area. The rest you'll shuffle up the deck and put face down. Now there's dice here that are going to just be counters. They're representing the level of decay on your particular Soulgivers as that blight is ravaging your planet. So you might lose them just based on it reaching level 6 and wiping out that Soulgiver. So keep that in mind. And then each Soulgiver does have their own tokens as well as their soul, because when they perish on the battlefield, their soul does remain, giving you the ability to pick it up and use it as a double whammy on a particular character, giving you double powers and so forth. So you also have portals. These portals are going to be positioned on your side of the board, and this is where you're trying to grab the fragment and bring it to one of your portals. Game is basically capture the flag, but you're manipulating your characters, you're manipulating the board, lots of interesting things going on here. And then you have modifiers. Modifiers are going to allow you to block out sections of the board, basically. Maybe you're blocking out the black holes so they can't be used. But there's all kinds of reasons you'll need these modifiers throughout the game. And then each character has their own set of tribute crystals. These tribute crystals will be used per turn in a way that you're activating abilities or actions on your particular Soulgiver characters. And you can only use 3 of these per turn, so use them wisely. And then finally, you have this anomaly deck. The anomaly deck is going to be another way that you get abilities throughout the game. Again, you would have to use a crystal to gather one of these cards, but you'll shuffle those up and place them next to the board. And you also have this handy reference card, each player does, that leads you through every step of the game. So you've picked your characters and placed them on the starting points on your portals, and you're ready to go. Now, there are a multitude of actions you can perform on your turn, but let's take a look at the basics, the free ones that you can use right away. So you do have a movement ability on your characters, and it's represented by an icon as well as a number showing you how far you can move. You don't have to move that full distance, but you can move up to that. So you'll take one of your Soulgivers and move that many spaces. Now, as you move around the board, it is orthogonal only, and there are black holes to look out for, and there are walls that you will have to traverse. Now remember, there are characters in this game that have special abilities, so you will be manipulating this board as well, maybe rotating tiles or repositioning tiles. Lots of things can happen as you shift this world around. Also important to note that as you're moving across the board, you can use partial movement, then do other actions, and then finish your movement. But what you can't do is use a character, go to another one, and come back to the previous character. No, once you finish with the character, it's done for that turn. Now, all your player pieces do have shields, and so that's one of the available actions. The free available actions is rotating your piece to leave the shields protecting you. Now, you don't want to forget this step because, again, you can't come back to the character and readjust it later. So keep that in mind. And you also have the ability to pick up a lost soul. One of your fellow soul givers perished on the battlefield and one of their souls still remain. So as long as you're on that tile, you can pick the soul up no matter which of the 4 cells that you're on. And that's important to note that there is a difference. Cells are the circles that you land on, and the overall tile is the whole square of the 4 cells. But no matter where you land on that tile, even if there are walls in your way, you can still retrieve the soul of the character that had fallen before you. Now, what's awesome about this is that it stacks on your player piece. And then that character that perished, that card will go under the current character or soul giver you're using, giving them extra powers and an additional health. One other thing that's important to note is that throughout the course of the game, you're going to be incrementing the dice on your soul givers and increasing the decay on them, getting ever closer to them being wiped out. But when you do gather a soul in those free actions, well, that will lower the value back to 1, give you a second win, so to say. Not only that, but again, you get extra character abilities. So keep that in mind. But the next set of actions that you potentially could be doing are tribute actions. This is where you have to spend crystals. And again, you only have 3 of those. But 3 of the big things you're doing is manipulating the fragment. So when you get to a spot or a tile where where the fragment is, then you can retrieve it and spend one of your crystals to do so. But in the beginning of the game, there is a barrier around the fragment. You will have to attack it first, again using a crystal to attack and then remove it. Now, attacking is important to note because not all your characters have that ability. You're looking for a sword icon on your character. So you have to have the appropriate character at the appropriate time to attack either your opponents or take down the barrier. So once you do, though, you can retrieve that fragment and put it on top of your particular piece or character soul giver. And what's neat here is these are magnets, so it like plops down. And that's another interesting thing about this game is that it's very tactile. There's a lot of tactile experience going on. Really interesting and adds a lot to it. So once you've gathered it, though, you have a couple of options. You can drop the fragment. That's another spending your crystal to do so. But the really interesting thing is if you have line of sight to one of your other soul givers, you can pass it. But it has to be exactly 3 spaces away in order to do that. But you can pass the ball, so to say. Really, really fun. And that comes in a lot. I used it quite a bit in my game, but passing it really can get you ever closer to your portal and winning the game. Or you can use a crystal to use one of your character's special abilities. Now, they don't just require that you use crystals because some of them have like a passive ability that you can use. But for their main structured ability, you have to spend a crystal to activate it. And we're not going to dive into all of them because there's just too many, but just know that they do all kinds of neat, interesting things. They can even just shut down your opponent for a time, things like that. But the one that I really like is the architect because it will manipulate the board. So moving along, you can move that row or column, basically, shifting it by 1 tile. The tile at the end will come off and come back to the start. So you can really move things around. Your opponent might be lined up perfectly and you're like, nope, pushing you down. Or you've positioned yourself to be face-to-face with the fragment. So there's lots of ways the architect can come into play. He's one of my favorites to start with for sure. Trying to just quickly get to the fragment and move the world around, so to say. And likewise, there is the confuser that can rotate not only tiles, but also your opponent, because you might rotate them so their shield face isn't showing, things like that. So again, there's ways to manipulate the world, and a lot of the different characters can really change up how you play. And each time you lose a character, it will radically change your abilities and things you can do. So you might also be using that crystal to activate your destruction or attack action. Now again, important to note that your character or soul giver has to have that sword icon in order to use this particular action. So you could just be taking out the barrier, removing it from the fragment so you can get in there and get it. But more likely you're going after your opponent, and you can only attack on their non-shield side, so which is why the Confuser again comes into play. You might have rotated them for a more optimal attack. So if that attack was successful, then the soul giver is removed from the board and replaced with the corresponding soul. And the soul will stay in play until retrieved. Now the opposing player can never retrieve that soul. It's only available to its population. And then again, once it is retrieved, you get to stack it on whatever soul giver picks it up, giving you the abilities of that previous soul giver. Really handy. But again, if it's attacked as a double stack, then that bottom soul is attacked first and removed. So there's lots of interesting things there as well. And there's even some abilities in the game that allow you to attack a particular tile, and if it's destroyed, you can flip it over. And there's even some ways to destroy souls that are out on the board. But in general, you're going to be using that attack and destruction ability to go after your opponent and try to eliminate them as much as possible. Now, another thing you might spend a crystal on is getting an anomaly card. So many different things can happen with these anomaly cards, but you can ever hold 3 of these at any one time. And you can only play them on your opponent's turn. Now, interesting thing here is if you position yourself, you could have a card that allows you to eliminate your opponent's portals, which gives them no escape back to their own world. Obviously, this is another way to end the game. But in general, though, you're using these abilities against your opponent and affecting them in negative ways. Now, a couple spots on the board also to take note of. Again, we have interference. If your opponent is there, that will block you from gathering one of the anomaly cards. There's also black holes, which can be detrimental if you fall into them. However, there is a character that can use them as portals. So again, those character abilities come into play, and there are so many. So you want to dive in and really look at all the different characters and what they can do for you throughout the game. And when a character does die, you just go to your deck of cards. You'll draw 2 cards, pick one, and place it back into the play. You'll take its corresponding token, putting it on the portal, ready to jump in for that next round. So you're not totally out of the game, but you do have a finite number of characters that you can tap into. So that deck of cards does really show that you can cycle through characters pretty quickly in this game as folks are eliminated and so forth. So those are the main things, but then again, you have those modifiers. You know, you have population modifiers, which will block out sections of the board potentially, block out black holes, keep them from being used as portals, things like that. So modifiers can really come into play as you use them with different characters or your population abilities. And at the end of your turn, you'll be moving those decay dice up by 1 for each character. Now, each character that used a crystal, you'll move the dice up an additional number. Now, the thing here is that when you get to 6, it will eliminate that particular character from the game. Again, dropping the soul on the board. And so the game will play this way until someone has captured the fragment or potentially the portals have been destroyed. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form. So keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, you know, I really enjoyed the tactile experience of this game. I like abstracts, and how you manipulate the board here and the soul givers, really interesting choices to be made. And I know we didn't deep dive into all the available actions of these characters, but that's some of the fun that you can find out. So definitely go check it out. And if it looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it from me. And until next time, we'll see you at the table.